everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Mary Magdalene and Jesus, what happened to them. But first I'm just going to tell you that during the video I'll put up some of my art, some of Mary Magdalene and others that aren't relevant to what I'm talking about, just to fill up some of the time during what I'm talking about. And you can get some of my art from various locations. I'll put the links up. I'm often asked about what happened to Jesus if he didn't really die on the cross, to Mary Magdalene and her children. I have gone into some detail in my books about how many children they had, their names, etc., and what happened to the children. But I've never actually talked about what happened to Jesus and Mary Magdalene in any kind of detail. So here we go. This is for those who are interested to know. Most people want to know where they lived out most of their lives after they escaped, and where they died and where they were buried. Jesus was being hunted down by the Jews because they found out he wasn't teaching Judaism and he was teaching the Gnostic tradition, which the Jews weren't very happy about, and they wanted to stop him. And it was found out that the Romans, who were the eagles, the Roman Empire was an eagle-led empire, they had found out about Jesus and Mary Magdalene and that they were pure bloodline and just using Judaism as a cover for who they really were. So with all this happening, they had to escape quickly. Not only because the Jewish people were after them, but also the Romans were getting to know about where they were. So the pregnant Mary Magdalene and Jesus and several of their followers all escaped to France. And they lived there quite happily for a while, but they had gotten word that the Romans were trying to find them there still. They had found out that they had escaped. Or at least they thought that Mary Magdalene had escaped. They weren't sure about Jesus. And the Romans were trying their best to make sure that the family bloodline didn't survive. They wanted to make sure that none of the serpent bloodline was still alive. After their first child was born, they decided it was no longer safe to stay there in France, because they knew that if the eagles ever found out that she had actually had a child, the child's life would be in danger because she was carrying on the bloodline, especially if it was a female child. So they came up with a plan to escape and never be found. One of their followers, who had red hair and was a similar age to Mary Magdalene, offered to stay in France and pretend to be Mary Magdalene. She had no children or husband and wanted to dedicate her life to the great work. And so for her, staying in France and pretending to be Mary Magdalene was no problem. She knew that the eagles would be very unlikely to kill her if they knew she didn't have children with Jesus, because that meant she wasn't continuing on the bloodline. She was instructed to say to anyone who came to ask her that Jesus never came with her and was killed by the Jews. The woman led a very peaceful life in France and later died there. And still to this day, some relics of her remain, like her hair and skull, that are venerated as if they were that of Mary Magdalene. And although this was a truly selfless woman, she was not pure bloodline. She was half serpent on her paternal side, but her mother was mixed. And, of course, she was not Mary Magdalene. But what she did to help the bloodline families will always be remembered, and she is highly honoured within the families. In her messages to the families, she said they had come looking for Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and that the soldiers who found her were convinced by her stories. Indeed, in those days, it was very easy to pretend to be someone else. All the soldiers knew was the approximate age of Mary Magdalene, and that she had red hair. And because the local villagers had also backed up her story, They had no reason to believe any different. It wasn't like they had photographs to check in those times. Mary Magdalene, Jesus and their daughter continued on further into Europe and went to the UK. They spent some time in Glastonbury, Somerset. They visited the Chalice Wells often, which is where the legends of Joseph of Arimathea bringing the blood of Christ to the wells comes from. Joseph of Arimathea was a follower of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. We can see that from his title of Joseph, which I have explained before, was a title for the males of the order, as Mary was for the females. He was a wealthy man, and it was by his means that the family were able to travel and survive the journey they had made to escape. He was an important and respected brother of the order, who is still honoured by the families to this day. Their journey continued on, up into Lancashire in the northwest of England, where the red rose of Mary Magdalene is still used today as their symbol. We are of course told about a different royal bringing in the red rose symbolism, but we know differently. While staying there, Mary Magdalene wrote in her memoirs that she was getting complaints from some of the villagers who lived close by them about the unusual smell coming from their dwelling when they were burning a strange and exotic herb. I am sure that those of you who have read my books will know which herb that was. She wrote that the Romans were moving ever northwards, and it was no longer safe for them, so they continued to move and went on to stay a short time in York. And then they finally settled in Scotland, and this is where all the other children were born and became the Pictish royals. The firstborn daughter later returned to France. In her writings she said she felt she belonged there, probably because that is where she was born, unlike her brothers and sisters, who were all born in Scotland. Both Mary Magdalene and Jesus died in Scotland and were buried there, but I cannot disclose the location for obvious reasons. They have the right to rest in peace, and we really don't want to have a stampede of curious tourists turning up to desecrate their graves, so it's better that it remains a secret location. But it is interesting that the location is already a sacred site and visited by tourists without them actually knowing that that's where these sacred bloodline members are buried and rest in peace. If you want more about this kind of symbolism about Mary Magdalene and Jesus, I suggest the Mary Magdalene Wright book. That's all for now. Another video is coming, so make sure you subscribe with your notifications on. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.